Hi, my name is Mike, and I'm here to read a comic. And today's comic is Superman, issue number 279, dated September 1974. I'm going to take a look at this okay issue of Superman. It wasn't a great issue, but it wasn't a terrible one either. But it's very indicative of the type of comics that were coming out from DC, where you just had a lot of mediocre stories. This is a comic that you could read very easily at the beach or on the bus, and then kind of forget about it like maybe 30 minutes after reading it. We see the cover. The cover is by Nick Cardy. The cover is a good one, and this issue features a co-star, and that is Batgirl. And this is kind of a somewhat unusual teaming up, in that usually we see Superman with Batman, or as Batman would like to say, the Batman-Superman team. But nevertheless, they did bring in Batgirl for a couple issues during this time. For Superman, I got the feeling, when I was flicking through the issues, I got the feeling that the first team up was probably a better story. But nevertheless, this is the one I picked. And I know I picked too many of these mid-1970s comics. But this is my favorite era from DC Comics. We see the cover. The most prominent figure is Batgirl. And she's in free fall in between two very large glass towers. And this is 1974, and this was the year that, or the previous year, that the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers, had opened. So I'm thinking that this was a partial, that opening was a partial inspiration for this story. We see Batgirl. She's in free fall between the two towers as Superman is rushing up to catch her, similar to what happened in the Superman film in '78. But unlike Lois, Batgirl here is not interested in being saved. So as she's in free fall, she's telling Superman, "No, don't save me, Superman. Save Metropolis." And the thing is that it looks like it's a normal day in Metropolis. So Superman's confused as fuck as to what am I supposed to save Metropolis from. The citizens buying overpriced coffees, because it looks like everything is fine here. So Batgirl, she's not being particularly contextual in terms of what's going on, because Superman breaks off this rescue here, and Batgirl just keeps dropping. It's going to be quite messy for Batgirl. And underneath we see a banner: "Together again, by popular demand, Superman and Batgirl." I felt that during this time, DC editorial really did not leverage Batgirl as much as they should have. This is a time where DC was looking for new markets, new demographics to appeal to. And you have this character in Batgirl who, one, is a female. So she's going to appeal to that market. Two, she's a female that is popular with male readers. So she's going to appeal to that market. In addition, Batgirl was already in popular media in the Adam West Batman TV show in the third season, where Yvonne Craig came in to play Batgirl. And Yvonne Craig's portrayal of Batgirl was very popular. There was no one who had any issues with her. And you would think that with that type of synergy, that DC editorial would say, yeah, let's try to market Batgirl. But instead, they were trying to market Man-Bat. And they even gave Man-Bat his own title. Man-Bat would often, be in Batman-related comics. And it just seemed odd that DC editorial never looked at Batgirl as sort of a potential key character in her own title. I don't know the story that's behind that, though. So I'm going to get into the story. Turn the page. I'm going to look at the splash page here. It's basically a retelling of what's going on in the cover. This was sort of a DC in-house style, where usually splash pages were dedicated to sort of reminding the reader what they're going to be seeing in this comic, even though they just saw it on the cover. And we see it again. It's sort of just a retelling of the cover, not done as well. The cover was done by Nick Cardy, who did a pretty good job with that cover. In this issue, there are two artists. We have Curt Swan, who's one of the classic Superman artists, and we have Phil Zuppa. Based on the art, there's a lot more Phil than there is of Curt. I have the feeling that Curt was probably on vacation at this time, and Phil probably did most of the grunt work, and they brought Curt in to kind of do the faces. That's the impression I got, because this doesn't really look like a Curt Swan Superman story. So on the splash page, we see. I should actually talk about the rest of the creative team before I go on to the story. This story was by Elliot Magden. Elliot Magden had done some good Superman stories. This is kind of a so-so effort here. And it was edited by Jules Schwartz. Yeah, I guess Jules did a fine job. There was one issue of Superman where Jules, he really should have been ashamed of himself for taking that check, because it was not edited well. But this one is, I guess it's okay. So anyway, we have Superman. He's flying toward the falling Batgirl. They are conversing, which is good. You know, Superman's seeking a little bit of context. And he's saying to her, "Batgirl, what do you mean you don't want me to save you from falling to your death?" And Batgirl says, "It's Metropolis you have to save, Superman. I can take care of myself." Okay, now it's a little more reassuring. It's kind of strange. On one hand, Batgirl has proven herself. And she's proven that she is a trustworthy person, that she does make good decisions, although you would not know it from this. And that, okay, maybe Superman should give her the benefit of the doubt. But nevertheless, this is obviously a very odd situation for Superman, because he still doesn't have enough context to know what's going on. Because once again, everything in Metropolis looks like it's fine. And we're told here that a city runs on fuel, energy, power. But when power-hungry men decide to drain the great cities dry, kind of like all those tech bros who just want to, drain all the resources from the city and put it into their coffers, it takes a man of steel and a maiden of darkness to stop the menace of the energy blackmailers. That is a very clumsy title. Okay, and we're also told that, the flamed hair woman of shadows, Batgirl, is co-starring. Okay, so I'm going to go into the story. Turn the page. So we see Clark Kent. Clark Kent is he's in his office at I think the Galaxy Media Empire, which is sort of like the Fox News of its time. Hopefully, Clark's being a little more truthful than Fox anchors. But nevertheless, this is sort of like, this is close to quitting time for Clark. Clark's not one of those 24/7 guys in terms of work. He's just kind of hanging around, just so Morgan Edge can kind of see him in the office. This is something that would happen in the offices of SpaceX or Tesla, where Elon Musk would kind of make these demands that he wants his employees working overtime, or off the clock to show, that they're really kind of motivated to be there. And they would kind of be there, but they would be kind of like, just kind of surfing the internet and just kind of hanging around. And that's what it looks like Clark is doing. And it turns out that he's getting a call. He's getting a call, and it's from Batman. Or I should say Bruce Wayne. Because obviously Clark is not in his Superman duds, so he's not Superman. And Bruce is Bruce because he has the cowl off. When the cowl is on, he is Batman. But the moment he takes that sweet leather cowl off, he is Bruce. And Bruce is getting down to business here. Because Clark answered the phone with a lot of pleasantries. And Bruce is saying, "No time to talk about socializing now. I need your help. Or rather, the help of Superman." So anyway, we have as Batman likes to say, the Batman-Superman team is together again. And it turns out that Bruce wants Clark to impersonate him as Batman. And what's going on is that there's a charity event going on in Gotham City that Batman was scheduled to be a part of and to perform there. But for some reason, and we're not told about it yet, Bruce needs Superman to appear as him. Now, normally this would seem kind of like, this is something up Superman's alley. Because Superman, he likes to clown audiences. So the idea of these people thinking that they're seeing Batman, but when they're seeing Superman, he's like, dude, I'm there. We're going to clown people who are going to a charity event. I am there. And I am ready to clown them. So anyway, we see that there's a folk act here. It's a large coliseum. It's the Gotham City Coliseum. And we kind of see this James Taylor, Carly Simon type, I guess. And a couple. And they're about to go out, but they're concerned that Batman hasn't shown up. And they know that most of the people there are there to see Batman. Then suddenly from the rafters, we see the figure of the Batman. And he shows up. It's kind of like, the Spider-Man Broadway musical In the Dark or something like that. So he comes out the exact same way here. And then we see Batman. He's going through various acrobatics, really impressing the crowd, with his acrobatics, with his sense of timing, with his daring, and the crowd is really impressed with this. But the thing is, this is really Superman doing this stuff. So this is mundane stuff for Superman. And we see in the audience, there is a well-known figure, and that is Barbara Gordon, who is a Gotham City congresswoman, or she's representing a district in Gotham City. So at this point, Barbara Gordon had stopped being a librarian, and she became a congresswoman. Now, I'd always mentioned that Batman would probably be a more effective crime fighter if he actually worked through the system. And, he had worked to change laws, that he had, worked to make the public aware of certain issues that are affecting them, rather than just driving around in leather with the boy Wonder and just looking to beat up people. Barbara Gordon, she did that for a while. She didn't have a boy Wonder, but nevertheless, she was driving on her motorcycle in her leather, just giving flying kicks to whoever she felt deserved it. She felt that criminals deserved that. So anyway, she's thinking to herself, sometimes I miss running around town in costume, the way he still does, that dirty man. But I like to think I'm doing as much good in Congress. Maybe she's a little bit ineffective, but she should actually be doing more there. So anyway, it looks like Batman's set is done with. And he thanks the crowd, and he says, listen, we got some really great folk music here for some of these needy kids. I ain't listening to that shit, but nevertheless, you guys paid for this, and you can enjoy this crap. So that's Superman going off as Batman. Then we see Gotham Harbor. So the scene changes from the Gotham Coliseum to Gotham Harbor. And we see two shady-looking individuals, and they're loading on barrels of oil to this barge. And it seems like these guys have been working for a while. They're kind of taking these huge, full barrels of oil, and they're kind of getting them on this barge. So these guys are tired. They're sweaty. They're not happy right now, but they're pretty happy that it's almost over. So the barge is ready to depart. And then we see the actual Batman. And he's on the rooftop. And he's overlooking what's going on here. And Batman, he's thinking to himself that, these guys have been stealing oil. And obviously, as a member of the One Percenters, he's very concerned about this. Because, it's not like he's stealing the city's oil or the citizens' oil. He's stealing from the 1%. And that really drives Batman nuts. Gonna turn the page. So anyway, it turns out that as the barge is leaving toward the open sea, it appears that part of the reason why this operation is going on at this moment is because these henchmen know that Batman is appearing at that charity event. And I guess they got the signal that Batman actually did show up and perform there. So this seems to be, or this is, the reason why Batman brought Superman in. Because he knew that if the henchmen who are behind these oil thefts, they knew that Superman was at the charity event, they're going to be more brazened, or they're just going to feel a little safer about, pulling off this operation. Because again, it's weird. Once again, you have the greatest crime fighter in America, and yet there's still crime going on in Gotham City. So anyway, as the barge is departing again to the open sea, Batman suddenly springs out of the water. And here he is. He's taking on the henchmen. Luckily, there's only about 2 of them. So this should be easy for Batman to do. Now we go back to the Gotham Coliseum. And it turns out there's more than one person who doesn't want to listen to this folk music. And that is Barbara Gordon. And the thing is that she decides to try to get backstage so she could talk to Batman for a while. And it turns out that Batman and Superman, they worked out a system that if Batman needs Superman's assistance, I should say, he can just simply whistle. And that's exactly what Batman does. Because Batman was able to take care of the 2 henchmen. But it turns out that on the lower decks, there's more henchmen. And Batman's a little apprehensive about taking on an entire crew of henchmen. So he whistles for Superman. Superman, who is in one of the costume rooms, he's changing from Batman into Clark Kent. But during that change, and by the way, he only has his shirt on, so he still has the Batman tights underneath, similar to like that cover by Neil Adams. I think it's 244, where Ra's al Ghul is holding up Batman's full costume, but then you see the unconscious Batman, and he has the hairy chest exposed, but he still has another pair of bat tights on him, which is kind of weird, but even though it's a classic cover. But it's similar to that here. And then Clark, he switches out into Superman, and he flies out to intercept Batman. Turn the page. Take a look at this one ad. Again, it's a Kung Fu ad. Kung Fu was so popular at this time. And also another bodybuilding ad. I guess they really knew their demographic in terms of who exactly was buying these comics. Going to take a look at an in-house ad. And this is an in-house ad for upcoming 100-page Giants. These 100 pages for 60 cents. These comics, from what I understand, they sold well. And I remember making my mom buy quite a few. In fact, there's actually a couple here that I do remember making my mom buy for me. But like I said, they lasted about a year. I think they had to cut back on the number of pages to make them more profitable. And DC sort of stuck with these larger comic books, because even though they were losing market share to Marvel. Sorry, the gummies. Even though they were losing a lot of market share to Marvel, the kids who were still loyal to DC, they were willing to spend extra money for extra stories. Because there were kids that did not like Marvel Comics. And I think the problem that those kids had mostly was that they didn't like the serialization that was going on in Marvel. That's the reason why most people went to Marvel, because they serialized their comics. But there were kids who didn't like that. They just sort of wanted these done in one issues. So I'm going to take a look at the individual comics. The one that I do remember making my mom buy is that issue of The Flash. And I think what was happening, it was Saturday. We were going to see a movie. The movie was Law and Order. It starred Carol O'Connor. My mom was the biggest All in the Family viewer. She loved that show, even decades after it had gone off the air. And because it had Carol O'Connor in it, we were going to see it. And, before we go to the movies, Mom would buy us candy and comic books. And I remember I picked up this particular issue of The Flash based on the cover. And the villain in this issue is basically Raggedy Andy. So, again, that's 7-year-old me making these decisions. I also remember this issue of World's Finest. I liked the cover, although I didn't really like the story that was inside of it. There's the Justice League of America here, and I'm having a hard time seeing what issue numbers they are. This looks like number 113. This was a pretty good issue, this issue of the Justice League of America. It was a Sandman-centered story. We see the Batman story that has Two-Face in it. I was kind of mixed on these Batman 100-page Giants, because while I was generally okay with the main story, they would have these reprints from the 30s, 40s, which were just really unappealing. And then they have a 100-page Giant for Shazam. Shazam, DC thought they had a huge coup when they acquired the rights to the original Captain Marvel character that they sued out of existence decades earlier, because it turned out that when Captain Marvel was being published by Fawcett Comics, it was doing really well, and it was outselling Superman. And of course, DC was looking to stop this, and they said that this infringes too much on our Superman character. A jury agreed, and the original Captain Marvel character was kaput for decades. Now, during this time, Martin Goodwin, who was the owner of Marvel Comics, he never forgot that. And he was always looking to get that Captain Marvel title trademarked. And eventually, I think in 1967, 68, it was legally eligible to be trademarked. And of course, obviously, that became, Marvel's Captain Marvel. And that's why they were able to use Captain Marvel in the masthead. But because Marvel had beaten DC to getting that name, they couldn't use Captain Marvel as the masthead or the official title of the comic, so they had to use Shazam. And then they can just say, hey, this is Captain Marvel. But anyway, DC thought these comics were going to be a huge hit. They turned out to be a big bomb. Even though the live-action kid show, Shazam, was very popular. Remember, there were two Captain Marvels. There was Jackson Boswick, who looked like Captain Marvel, and then you had John Davy, who kind of looked like him. He had the pot belly of steel. And and there's also there's a romance, which I would have hated back then, but I would read now because I enjoy reading those as an adult, a near 60-year-old adult. And there's Unexpected, their horror title. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the story. We see Barbara Gordon. She's just going to go into the dressing room here. She's not even going to bother knocking, knowing that there's going to be a grown man probably undressing. But nevertheless, she encounters an empty room. But she sees two sets of clothing. She sees the Batman costume, and she sees Clark Kent's clothing. And she knows that this belongs to Clark Kent because she's going through his wallet here. And maybe Superman should have a policy where he kind of carries around his wallet, even if he's Batman, even if he's Superman. Sorry, gummies. But nevertheless, Barbara Gordon sees that the civilian clothing does belong to Clark Kent, and she is surprised that the mild-mannered reporter of Metropolis is actually Batman, the crime fighter of Gotham City. Now, this is one of the things in the story, and it's the only way to make it make sense, and that is nobody can figure out, or nobody can think or come up with the concept that maybe Superman can easily imitate Batman, if that made any sense. This is beyond the idea that Superman can impersonate Batman is beyond anyone in the DC universe. And this is the only way this story makes any sense. So anyway, we go back to Gotham Harbor. We see that Batman, he's pulling Superman up on the barge. Now, the reason Batman called Superman was like, hey, I might be in trouble here. But then there's no trouble at this point. But you know what? I'm thinking that he's probably thinking about the harbor. He's one step ahead of me. I know the story, and yet Batman is still ahead of me. Because Batman said, listen, I can handle the clowns on the barge, but the guys on the dock, they may be a problem. Or the guys on the ship may be a problem that this contraband is heading to. So anyway, it turns out the criminals' plan is that they're going to basically starve Gotham City of energy. This is why they're stealing the barrels of oil. And the barge is coming closer and closer. And the thing is that since the mothership of this criminal operation is in international waters, and I think there's like a 3-mile limit, like the first 3 miles of a country's shoreline, that's their that's it within their domain. but after the 3 mile limit, you're in quote international waters, and that's kind of like where the jurisdiction changes and the law changes. So this is the energy stealers. They think this is their little loophole into evading legal repercussions, because their attitude is, hey, we take our stolen property, and we're more than 3 miles out. It's suddenly not stolen, because the country that we stole it from, they don't have any jurisdiction. That may work on paper. That never works in reality. And these guys are going to find out soon here. So anyway, the barge is getting closer and closer to the mothership. Now, the guys on the barge, the henchmen on the barge, on the mothership, I should say, because Batman and Robin control the barge. They do have binoculars, but they're not powerful enough for them to see that Batman and Superman are driving the barge. So the thing is, the henchmen on the mothership, they're getting prepared to dock with the barge, or the barge is getting ready to dock with them. The gummies are really working. So anyway, the henchmen on the mothership, they don't know any better at this point. They actually don't unload the cargo from the barge to the mothership. They take the barge, the entire barge, and they're going to put it on the mothership here. This does not seem particularly sound physics-wise. Gonna turn the page. Oh, and it turns out the plan of the plan is to resell the oil back to Gotham at a much higher price. And so as the barge is being lifted up, we see Batman, we see Superman here, we see the tied up henchmen that Batman had beat up earlier. The captain, he doesn't seem to be paying attention to the barge. He's just telling the guys who are handling the ropes and the levers to sort of, he's bring it up, slow down and all that. And it turns out that it's the captain's first mate who sees the heroes here. So trying to be a little comedic here. The captain then suddenly notices Batman and Superman. And they kind of make jokes about how they had caught these henchmen. And, hey guys, you guys are next. So then the captain, he calls out to his crew saying, this is an emergency, drop the barge. Like that's going to do anything against these two guys. But the crew doesn't have time to actually to follow through with that order, because we see both Batman and Superman are going into action. I actually should say Superman Batman, because this is Superman's comic. Although, Batman's attitude is, any comic I'm in, I'm the star. And it seems like Superman is using his heat vision to sort of take care of the ship's operations. So the ship can't really operate at full capacity at this point. Batman, he's taking care of the crew. He is furious. He is, how dare these dirty ass criminals steal from the 1%? Now, hey, I'm always willing to help out someone who is, less fortunate, money wise, but I get something out of it. I get to punch a mugger, but this really cuts to the heart of of Bruce Wayne, of Batman. These guys have been stealing from the 1%ers. So and Batman, he's letting it have it. He's saying to this one guy, "Don't leave, scum. I've got a fist for you." And now this guy should be a little scared, because you got a guy in a leather cowl, leather cape, leather boots, and he's talking about giving you the fist. And but Batman, he's not talking that way. He's not going to give that type of fist. He's going to give a fist to the jaw here. So the criminals, they're saying, we're outside the 3-mile limit. You don't have jurisdiction against us. Then Batman says, I'm not interested so much in law as I am in justice. With this oil, the entire city of Gotham will sludge to a halt. Do you know the effect that will have on us 1%ers? And again, this is kind of interesting. This is something that's rarely brought up in comics, is that there is a difference between law and there is a difference between justice. But you can see Batman is also kind of using this in a very self-serving way. And he's really angry. He's letting it out on this guy. Going to turn the page. Then we see Superman, and he lifts the entire mothership, which is a very large freighter. And he says, "Oh, you're in the you're outside the 3-mile limit. Let me put you inside the 3-mile limit." And Superman, I should say, he regards the law as kind of something that's very lenient. Sometimes it leans this way, other times it leans that way. And Superman, he's kind of leaning that way toward the law. So the law at this point is a little more, it's more academic than actually something he has to follow. So he's simply going to, say, basically just kind of change the evidence here. And there is a beaker that does say 3 miles. So, these guys have done their homework in terms of corrupting the evidence here. Are these guys guilty? We'll make them guilty. So anyway, we go back. It's the following morning. So it looks like basically Superman and Batman, they wrapped up this criminal operation. And we see, reading the Gotham Gazette, Superman helps Batman foil energy blackmailers. Whoa, 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 whoa. Bruce Wayne is going to have a shit fit when he sees this headline. Superman's name was put before Batman's? Oh, hell no. This publisher, he is going to get a visit. He is going to hear an earful about that. And we see other headlines. Mysterious stand-in for Cape Crusader appears at concert. Superman and Batman, once again, Superman's name is first, last night kept a tanker from hauling a month's supply of Gotham's oil out of the country to be held ransom. Like, I don't know, does Gotham City make their own individual oil purchases? They're not kind of supposed to do that. There was a time in Los Angeles, not Los Angeles, near Los Angeles, Long Beach. Long Beach, there had been discovery of oil. There is oil in California. And basically the city of Long Beach created their own municipal oil company. And soon Long Beach, California was like the richest city in America in the kind of like mid to late 40s. But then what happened is that the state said, hey, you guys aren't supposed to do this. You know, you're a municipality within a larger state. You know, you don't get to declare this type of financial independence. And eventually they did break up that municipal oil company, lack of a better word. Although the thing is, during the time that they did do it, Long Beach was getting millions of dollars, and they were able to improve their infrastructure. So anyway, sorry for that tangent. So anyway, well, one thing we know is that Bruce Wayne is fuming at seeing this newspaper front page. But we also see Barbara Gordon here, looking very attractive, I should say. I'm trying to think who she kind of looks like. Maybe a young Susan Sarandon. The last thing I saw Susan Sarandon in was the Blue Beetle movie, which was not a bad movie. And she looked great in it, and she sounded great. I mean, her politics are a little, little too privileged for me, because it's like no matter who wins, Susan's going to be okay. But some of us, whoever wins, means a lot. But nevertheless, she does look like a young Susan Sarandon here, and this is encouraging her to believe her hypothesis that Clark Kent is Batman. And she's going to take a trip to Metropolis to sort of speak to Mr. Kent. Turn the page. So anyway, Barbara Gordon, she's in Gotham City, and she is at the Galaxy building. As I had mentioned, Clark Kent was working for a huge media conglomerate at this time, and he was the lead reporter for WCGB or something like that. So anyway, it appears that Barbara Gordon, who calls herself Babs, by the way, which is a little odd, but she arrives at the building and she's greeted by Steve Lumbar. Steve Lumbar was kind of the Joe Namath avatar. Didn't really look too much like Joe Namath. I'm sure there was another football player I can point to that Steve Lombard looked more like, but nevertheless, he was sort of the arrogant, obnoxious. What would you call them? A bro guy, for again lack of a better word. So anyway, he encounters Congresswoman Gordon. She's obviously a very attractive woman. He's coming on very strongly. And Barbara Gordon is asking Steve, where's Clark Kent's office? Steve doesn't understand why, such a beautiful woman would want to be in Clark's presence and not his, for example. So anyway, the two are greeting each other. Barbara Gordon is sticking up for Clark Kent, saying, after Steve had asked, why would you want to see that cold fish? And she's saying, hey, maybe I think he's cute. And now excuse me while I go to his office. Steve is saying, hold on here. You do not have agency. You have to spend X amount of time with me. And you're a really hot chick, and I got to see if I can score with you. However, Barbara Gordon, she lays down the line. First of all, she says, you can call me Babs, which is weird because if you want people to take you seriously, you're not going to call yourself Babs. And then she karate chops him, and this judo move sorry about that. This judo move then puts Steve right on his ass here. So he's kind of like, and Steve is also thinking to himself, hey, why does Clark have all these tough friends? Because apparently this has happened more than once, where somebody was either a friend of Clark Kent or was looking for Clark Kent, and Steve intercepted them, and Steve was thrown for a big loss since he's the football guy. Clearly, Clark Kent, Superman, you're kind of running in those type of circles. You're gonna have people, who definitely know how to fight. So anyway, Barbara Gordon, she reminds Steve that she's a congresswoman in addition to kicking his ass. So then finally, Babs, she reaches Clark Kent's office. And the two of them have met. They probably did not meet in the offices of the Galaxy building. But a few issues previously, the two had teamed up. And Clark Kent was a prominent character in that story. So obviously, Barbara Gordon, Batgirl, she not only had to interact with Superman, she also interacted with Clark Kent. And the two have a very pleasant exchange here. These two I can definitely see on a Tinder date. Clark might be a little bit too stiff for Barbara, but Barbara seems to like nice, decent guys. Oh, I apologize for that noise. So what they're doing is they're sort of catching up on the last time they had met each other, and Barbara Gordon is asking about a new syndicate that seems to be growing, that criminal operation, and it seems like the group is referring to themselves as the energy blackmailers. Now, during this time, OPEC, for the first time in its history, 73, 74, they were starting to flex their muscle economically. And there was an oil embargo. And there was a very sharp price change in the price of oil. God, these gummies. So, I think what happened is when it caused a lot of problems, there were gas shortages, and gas actually had to be rationed, in addition to being really high priced. And that affected every economic indicator throughout the country. Because again, you're talking about power, what's powering commerce, which is why Batman was so passionate about this. And when OPEC did this, there was a lot of resentment in the population in the United States. One was, how dare these non-white people think they can actually flex their economic muscle to us. But also there was also a lot of resentment about what was going on in terms of the rationing. So I think Elliot Magden might have had a little bit of resentment because he's calling them blackmailers, even though in this case this isn't actually a criminal enterprise. Anyway, Barbara Gordon is getting right to the point, and she wants to know, why did Batman ask you to stand in when he went after the energy blackmailers last night? So as far as Barbara Gordon is concerned, because there was Batman's costume and Superman and Clark Kent's civilian clothing, the two are interrelated, and that means that Clark Kent is Batman. It never occurs to her that, hey, the guy that I'm accusing of being Batman kind of lives in a different city. But he also lives in a city where there's this very powerful being called Superman. And Barbara Gordon never thought to herself, you know what? Superman can imitate Batman very easily. Does not cross her mind. I'm going to turn the page. Clark Kent, I should say Clark Kent's kind of caught a little flat-footed here. All right. Some of the ads here are not terribly interesting. So Clark Kent's kind of in a tough spot here, because he has this very intelligent woman that he likes, that he trusts, that he respects, kind of accusing him of being another hero. Now, this doesn't really bother Clark too much, that he's being confused for Batman. Now, if anyone dared to say to Bruce Wayne that you're Superman, he's going to have a fit. He is going to have a fit. If you think I'm Superman, really? You think I'm Superman? So she's a little fortunate here. Clark, he's trying to buy time here, so he kind of asks her out for a coffee. So this is kind of turning into kind of a match date, maybe a Tinder date later on. And Clark has to think of something. Now the two of them are going to the cafe, but they're doing it very slowly here. Clark is concerned here about what type of explanation that he can give Barbara Gordon here. This is sort of one of the things with this, with the secret identities. I kind of feel that maybe if someone else is a fellow crime fighter, and you know them, you trust them, respect them, maybe you should kind of like, be a little more forthright with them. Because, he has to hide his identity from Barbara Gordon just like he would a civilian in Metropolis. So anyway, the explanation that Clark is giving Barbara Gordon is that Clark is working on a news special on costume superheroes, and because he's working on this special news segment on superheroes, this has increased his interest in superheroes to the point where he was okay with impersonating Batman. Now Clark, he's a tall, good-looking, in-fit guy, but you're not looking at this guy thinking, "Hey, this guy can do Batman-like acrobats." And once again, this is not crossing anyone's mind that maybe Superman can impersonate Batman pretty easily. Now we have visions of 9/11 as we see fire truck after fire truck after fire truck. They're racing through traffic here, and both Clark and Barbara they're taken by surprise here. We see Clark. He uses his supervision, and he sees the World Trade Center, and he's noticing some type of vibrations going on with the other buildings around it. And Clark is thinking to himself, I don't know exactly what's going on here, but this looks serious enough for Superman to get involved with. And we see Clark, he immediately runs back to the Galaxy building. Now, the excuse that he's given to Barbara is that he wants to use the company's flying newsroom. Around this time, this is when news organizations started to actually have their own helicopters. And again, we saw that in Superman 78. And yeah, there was a time where helicopters would fly in and out into New York City directly. That was the Pan Am building at the time. And Pan Am had this helicopter service, which was amazing. Because one reason is the particular area where the Pan Am building was, it's still there. It's called MetLife now. But the building was in a neighborhood with pretty much the richest people in New York City. It was like the East Side in the 40s, 50s, 60s. That's where the power and the money is in New York. And yet, and as much as they complained, and they hated that helicopter service, and their reasons would be justified in 1977, they were not able to stop Pan Am from having this helicopter service. If you're interested in seeing it, you can see it in a movie called Coogan's Bluff. It's a 1968 Clint Eastwood movie. Well worth watching. It is a good movie. And what happened with the helicopter service in 1977, helicopter was trying to land. The blades broke off of the helicopter. One guy who was on the roof, who was a filmmaker, he was a horror filmmaker. He ended up getting decapitated from one of the blades. And I think the other blade went flying into the street, and I think he killed a couple of people. And that's when the helicopter service ended. And Pan Am had the nerve to try to restart it, but like everyone was like, no, that's over with. So anyway, Clark is running in to get into the helicopter. He's gonna throw Margot Kidder off of it. Barbara Gordon is running after him. This is like you have the Tinder date. You go to the restaurant, and then the date dines and dashes. So Barbara Gordon, she's like, hold it, you're not going to dine and dash on me here. You can turn the page. They're in the lobby here. There's a crowded elevator. It looks like Clark is heading for that crowded elevator. But the thing is that Clark is not running as Superman. He's running as Clark Kent. So he's basically just running in as a normal guy. Barbara Gordon is Batgirl. She's in much better shape. She's probably a little faster than Clark. She runs into the elevator ahead of him. She's in the elevator. But then suddenly, the second elevator opens up. And this is where Clark goes into super speed, and he immediately jumps into this empty elevator that had just opened up as the other one was just closing. So this is how they were able to separate the two of them. Now, Clark, he takes off his clothing in the elevator, and he immediately flies out of the elevator here, doing all this damage. I mean, honestly, if you really cared about his secret identity, this is the worst way to do it, because he's just leaving all the evidence there that he is Superman. But then you'll have, Congressman Barbara Gordon going on the news program. No, he's not Superman. He's Batman. So anyway, he flies out the building. The art's fine, and this is definitely not Kurt Swan. There's some action here, which is nice because there's not much action in this comic. But nevertheless, from a logical point of view, this doesn't make any sense. And you can see why DC was kind of losing market share to Marvel. Marvel would never do anything like this, at least not this hokey. So anyway, it turns out Superman, he's flying into the area of the Twin Towers. And it looks like one of the buildings is damaged. And it looks structurally damaged to the point where it might collapse. So the people inside who feel that they're trapped, because there's no fire going on, I guess maybe they might not trust the stairs. But nevertheless, they see Superman flying in, so they feel confident they're going to be saved. Superman, he doesn't quite know what's going on in terms of what started it. Obviously, he knows what to do in terms of this building and how to help these people. But nevertheless, he's still kind of thinking. He's thinking ahead of himself a little here, and he doesn't really quite understand where these vibrations are coming from. Turn the page. So anyway, it turns out what he's doing, and I don't understand the physics behind it, is that he's sort of swirling in a circle around the building. And I guess what this is doing is that it's structurally keeping the building up and keeping it structurally sound enough for the firemen to rescue the employees inside of it. One of them is saying, "Wonder why Superman's spinning around the building." The other person says, "Who cares, as long as it stops shaking." I'm assuming that conversation was an avatar between the readers and the editors, where the readers are probably ready to send in all these letters asking, why is Superman doing this, and how is this physically sound? And the editors are saying, don't think about it. Please don't think about it. So Jules Schwartz is like saying, I don't want to see these damn letters asking us why Superman is doing this. And then it turned, whatever Superman was doing was working. And Superman is currently noticing that there are other buildings vibrating at this point. But once again, he doesn't understand where exactly is the source of this. But then it turns out that in Metropolis Harbor, because we're not in Gotham at this point, we're in Metropolis, I should add. So Barbara Gordon went to Metropolis. And it turns out that there's another freighter similar to the freighter that we saw earlier. And it's making an announcement to the city and saying, "Attention Metropolis, this is the controller. Surrender your month's supply of fuel oil or face destruction." So the thing what happened is that this guy's plot, he's dedicated to this idea. This is kind of like, Stockton Rush here, where he was so dedicated to that idea he ended up imploding. This guy, the controller, has this idea that he's just going to steal all this oil, and he really likes it. Now, the operation in Gotham was ended by Batman, but this guy's saying, no, we'll just go to another city. He totally forgot that there's a way more powerful guardian of that city, but nevertheless, he's dedicated to this idea. So we see two figures here. We see Superman. It looks like he's flying off to the harbor because he definitely heard this announcement. If regular citizens can hear this announcement from the ship's bullhorn, Superman definitely heard it. And there's a helicopter in the background, and it turns out Batgirl is actually swinging on it. So she's not actually in the helicopter. She actually has a rope tied to the helicopter. So she's traveling that way, sort of similar to, I guess, Spider-Man. Now, I had always mentioned that one of the things I noticed about Superman comics in this era was that they were always kind of trying to incorporate Spider-Man tropes. So I guess they were like, well, this kind of looks like Spider-Man, and that's who we're competing against, so we'll just add it in there. And it turns out that Superman is following one lead, but Batgirl is following another lead. So the thing is that they seem like they're going in the same direction, but they aren't. And Batgirl is she's actually using a light meter that she, quote, borrowed from the Daily Planet photographer. So she basically stole this guy's equipment, but she's calling it borrowing. And she's saying, hey, I'll bring it back. Kind of like, you go into a bank, you quote, you want to creatively borrow some money. You pull out a gun, you say, don't worry, I'll pay you back in a few years with interest. And going to turn the page. Going to take a look at this one ad. It's for Big Jim. This toy for Big Jim. Big Jim, he's a sports guy here. He does his karate. He has his karate studio. His little Cobra Kai here. And he's giving a flying kick to Ralph Macchio here, or maybe Mr. Miyagi. Turns out he also plays basketball, although he's only playing against fellow white guys. He's also a baseball star and a football star. I don't remember Big Jim going anywhere really. So anyway, we'll going back to the story. In the background, we see another picture of the Twin Towers. So again, this is sort of it's definitely kind of motivated this story. So anyway, Batman is heading toward the freighter. Sorry about that. Batman is heading toward the freighter. However, behind him, he's noticing the helicopter that is carrying Batgirl. And as the helicopter gets between the two towers, Batgirl lets go. So at this point, she's in free fall, like we saw on the cover, between the two towers. Now, Superman is starting to notice what Batgirl had figured out a little earlier. And that basically the reason why the buildings around the World Trade Center, or the Twin Towers, were being affected, but not the Twin Towers themselves, is that the Twin Towers were being used as tuning forks. And apparently what's going on is the villain has some type of method where they can turn the twin towers into tuning forks, which means they start vibrating sound waves. And it's the sound waves that are being vibrated from the World Trade Center that's affecting the other buildings around it, if that makes any sense. So anyway, we see Batgirl. She's in free fall here. Now, she does have her wits about her. So she is thinking to herself about what she's planning on doing. And the thing is that the reason why she's in free fall is that she needs to see where the exact source is in terms of what floor it's on. Now, normally, what she can do is that, somehow she can land and then maybe take the elevator and kind of use the meter that way. But no, Batgirl's not about that. She wants express service. So she's going to say, listen, as I'm in free fall, I'm going to check this light meter here. And where ground zero is, that's, I'll know where the source is. So we don't know what Batgirl plans on doing after that. Because she keeps falling. This might be a problem for her. So Superman's on intercept course. And, he's heading toward Batgirl like she's Margot Kidder. But then Batgirl, she uses her bat rope, her batarang here. And she grabs on to one of the windows of the Twin Towers. And by the time Superman reaches Batgirl, he already sees she doesn't need any help. So, she fixed her own problem here. Which if you're a good hero, that's what you do. And Superman, he's still a little bit in the dark. He's kind of figured out a few things through osmosis, but he's basically listening to Batgirl because he knows obviously Batgirl has more information than he does, and he's not going to treat her like a girl and not listen to her. But Superman, I should say, he is following Batgirl's lead, and I'm sure Batman, he looks upon that very kindly, saying, whether it's Superman, Batgirl, or even Robin, Superman should be following our lead. So they crash into one of the windows here. And then they come across an individual called J. Saul Carey. He looks kind of like Colonel Sanders here. And and Superman has a hunch that he's actually the guy that's behind these energy blackmailers, and it turns out to be true. Carey, he doesn't want there's no need to interrogate this guy. This guy just simply gives up the information, and he's on a suicidal run here. Again, this guy's kind of like Stockton Rush here. He's like, my life be damned. I'm gonna be committed to this idea. And this guy has Stockton Rush type of commitment to this idea. I'm gonna turn the page. So then what happens is that the oil that this guy, Colonel Sanders, was able to steal from Metropolis, and it's been loaded onto his freighter, he's just releasing it. So he's acting like Beyond Petroleum here. And he's just releasing it into the harbor. Superman does something really disgusting. He actually uses his super swallowing power and his lungs to basically suck up the oil that's in the harbor, and he spits it back into the tankers. So, and he closes the lid. So basically the oil has been protected. It's a little polluted there, but nevertheless, it fits the approval of DC Universe editors. Then we see Batgirl and Colonel Sanders blandly looking at the events from the building and kind of just going through some, I guess, some kind of dull, boring banter here. Batgirl does not look particularly well drawn here. What was kind of the thing that was interesting was that we didn't really see any close-ups of Batgirl until this moment. So it seems strange. I don't know who's responsible for this. Was it Kurt or was it Phil Zupa? I'll probably give Kurt the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes it's strange when you see artists who can't draw particular characters. Like, as great an artist as Dave Cockrum was, he couldn't draw the Beast to save his life. So anyway, they tried to inject a little humor. As Superman is flying off, the controller, Colonel Sanders, he's saying, he's probably off to find some good mouthwash somewhere. And then Batgirl admonishes him. Don't make fun of that man, Carrie. If it weren't for him, thieves and robbers and robber barons like you could trample the public to mush. You're lucky to live in a world where there's a Superman. This makes no fucking sense. This guy doesn't want a world with Superman in it. And he's okay with robber barons like stealing from the public. So I don't understand this admonishment from Batgirl. And then we have an epilogue, because they kind of have to explain what's going on. And Clark Kent admits that he was the one who impersonated Batman at the Gotham Coliseum. And yeah, he's actually in a Batman costume without the leather cowl on. I'm thinking that maybe Clark was thinking, oh, this might be way too kinky to televise, but nevertheless, and he's explaining that the various type of equipment, kind of like the movie equipment, that allowed him to sort of make these stunts. He's basically saying that it was all wires and stuff. Again, kind of interesting, drawing an analogy or a reference to the Superman movie. When the scene where Superman takes Lois Lane into the sky, and she has the Gordon Lightfoot song in her head, and she's very dreamy. When they were actually filming that sequence, the cast that they had created for Margot Kidder, it broke, and Christopher Reeves actually had to be Superman for that moment because he had grabbed her just before this happened, and it probably saved her from having a devastating fall, because they were like 35-40 feet up in the air when they were doing this. That accident ended up costing Margot Kidder a lot, because she ended up with back pain that followed her for the rest of her life, and it made her like abuse medicines, and she had other mental issues that were being ignored because of that. And we hope she has found peace in her next plane of existence. But nevertheless, Clark's going through this on air, and it turns out it's weird. This apparently was a videotape thing, because Clark is actually sitting in the green room of the Galaxy building, watching himself doing this report with Lois and with Congresswoman Gordon, or Babs Gordon. So the thing is that hey, he's with these two hot babes here. That's all you need to know. And it turns out that his explanation worked. Lois believes it, and she's even quoting Clark in the report, saying, "Both feet planted on the ground. Would you really, Clark? I don't know. Maybe Clark wants to be the new Casey Kasem. I don't know. But Barbara Gordon is buying into this explanation. And she's saying, well, that certainly explains why it was Clark, of all people, who masqueraded as Batman. It couldn't be Superman masquerading as Batman and saying Clark Kent is cosplaying or being Superman. No, these dots never connect. Anyway, Clark is kind of clowning on Lois here, saying, this Lois hoe, she actually thinks I'm Superman. And they're kind of having a little fun with that here. And Barbara Gordon's thinking, yeah, right. Lois must be putting Clark on. Clark's a nice guy and all that. But he's no more a Superman than I am Chic something's belly dancers. I have no idea what was going on that made belly dancing kind of like a cultural reference. So I'm not even going to guess. And that's the end of this rather mediocre story. And then we're told that next month it's going to be Duel of the Diamond Demon. And it's going to be the third week of July that issue is going to go out. And there's going to be a Private Lives of Clark Kent in that issue. And it's going to co-star Perry White. And yeah, so that's what the kids have to look forward to. I'm going to quickly look at this ad. This is an ad I've seen before. This is one where Clark has his arms around the postman Hitler here. Because that's what he kind of looks like, to be honest. He looks like a cross between Hitler and Mr. Whipple, who is telling people don't squeeze the Charmin. And the thing is, they have some of the comics that are out on the newsstand at the time. One of them was Rima, the Jungle Girl. Which, by the way, Rima, not a bad comic book. And then we go back, we see the Batman issue here with Two-Face. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the next story, which is slightly better drawn. I think Kurt had more say in the art here. It's a fabulous world of Krypton. So it's kind of like Big Gay Al. It's just fabulous. And these are sort of stories that took place on Krypton before the planet exploded. And it turns out that Superman is in Kandor. Kandor is the city in a bottle that Brainiac 5 had shrunk down and had taken it captive before Krypton exploded. So while the planet itself is gone, there is a part of Krypton that actually does exist. And the citizens, they exist in this bottle. They don't seem to have many issues with it. Very few of the citizens in the bottle actually did escape or were released, and they would go into the real world. A lot of them just didn't seem to have very much interest in doing that. And we're told that this story is The Magic Master of Krypton. And the creative team is Carrie Bates. And the art is by Kurt Swan and Tex Bleswell. Or Blaisdell. So anyway, Superman, he's visiting Kandor. He's in a museum there. And he's looking at the statue of a figure called Calrox, the Magic Master. And Superman's not familiar with this character, so he asks the museum curator to sort of tell him some stories about this character, about who he is, why is he so important, why does he have this brand, the Magic Master. And the museum curator is telling Superman that this individual, he did perform great acts of magic on Krypton, even though we Kryptonians know that magic does not exist. Because, we're a very scientific society. So it turns out that this guy, Cal Rocks, he does go under a different stage name, though, but I'm not going to pronounce it because it's kind of a lame name. And it turns out that he kind of gives these kind of Carney-like performances. Now, what he does, I'm going to turn the page, is that he's more of an illusionist than a magician. He does so. Even though he has an act that appears that he's performing magic, these are really illusions, and he sort of views himself as an illusionist because he's not saying that this is magic. He's saying, watch me do this. So I don't know, he's maybe more like David Copperfield than, say, Doug Henning or whatever other magicians there were. So anyway, we see one of his tricks is that he points to a cloud bank that just looks like any cloud bank, and with the snap of a finger, he's able to create these cloud sculptures of his face. So it kind of looks like, with the snap of a finger, he had changed the structural shape of the cloud to appear as someone's face. And the citizens, they're very impressed here. They're saying this is the best trick, that I've ever seen. I don't know how he pulled it off. So, the guy himself, he's not saying he's a magician. He's just saying I'm a really good illusionist, and you need to figure out how I'm doing these tricks. And it turns out that the Cal Rocks, the magician, he has a young apprentice. And the young apprentice is Mazma. Mazma. This is a terrible name. But nevertheless, Mazma is sort of like the young boy wonder of this magician here. He's the guy who the apprentice here is the guy who actually sets up the illusions. And the deal is that, Cal Rocks, he's more of the performer. And the thing is, the act depends on perfect timing. And the young apprentice, he's the one who's responsible for setting up the illusions, and he's the one who's responsible to make sure that the timing is correct. And here he's thinking to himself, but it's for the benefit of the reader, that it doesn't matter that the audience knows Cal Rock's, quote, magic is worked with tricks. The fun comes from seeing how it's done and not seeing how. So he's basically kind of giving up that basically he's very popular because he's able to fool a lot of people and they can't figure out his tricks. So he generates a lot of interest from the Kryptonian public simply because they want to catch him in the act. They want to see how this trick works. Turn the page. Cal Rocks, he's doing other tricks. He's sort of creating these water creatures. So he's able to take some of the water here from the lake here. He's able to transform them into kind of like, mermaid type creatures here. And again, it looks like this is another successful trick because the audience can't figure out how he's doing it. And the apprentice here, he's thinking to himself that he's just telling kind of the reader how they were able to do it. Now, a problem shows up here. There are two boulders here. Now, this is where a problem shows up. There are two boulders here, and Kazrak is explaining what he plans on doing with the snap of a finger. But it turns out the apprentice rigged the wrong boulder. So Kazrak, he's focusing on the left boulder, but the thing is, the trick was set up for the right boulder to be used. Now, the thing is, he's kind of snapping his fingers here more than once. And he immediately knows something went wrong because Usually their timing is perfect, but in this case it didn't work. And the apprentice, he knows he's in trouble. He knows he's in a lot of trouble because he had one job to do and he did not do it. And it looks like Cal Rock's here. He's trying to bluff his way out of it. Turn the page. And the thing is, he's getting a great deal of praise from the public. Now, at this point, the young apprentice, he had his eyes closed. He had his eyes closed. He had his hands over his eyes. So he doesn't know exactly what happened. But the thing, it turned out that a geyser, a water mineral geyser had just erupted where the boulder was. So the thing is, the audience thought that was the trick. And Cal Rocks and the apprentice, they're sort of just playing it off, kind of like, they're not going to give away this bluff here. Now the apprentice thinks that actually what had happened is that Cal Rocks actually did use magic. He was somehow able to access the fabric of magic that exists in the DC universe. And it doesn't appear that Cal Rocks thinks this, but this is simply what the apprentice is kind of thinking about. Now, here's a scene where it kind of shows maybe a little bit of what goes on with Superman. Is that the magician, Cal Rocks, he's furious at the young apprentice because he found out that, hey, he had rigged up the wrong boulder and they were just lucky that the act worked. Cal Rocks, he pimp slaps this young apprentice. Oh, and he's doing it for 2 panels. So Kurt had him slapping him twice. I'm assuming that Kurt is maybe working out some old demons here with his editor, Mort Weisinger. Now the thing is that this tells us something about Superman, because as Superman is hearing this, and he's hearing about how Cal Rocks is pimp slapping his young apprentice, he's thinking to himself, all those years of me punking Jimmy, I think I was too easy on him. Because there were times where Superman was not particularly nice to Jimmy Olsen. I think the worst and the lowest moment was when Superman denied a parched Jimmy water as he was in the desert. And some of the water had accidentally spilled onto Superman's boots. And Jimmy licks the water from the boots. That was, I think, the lowest moment. There were other moments where I think Superman married Jimmy to a gorilla.
I couldn't fuck a gorilla.
He put Jimmy, not Timmy, although he might as well be Timmy. He put Jimmy into a tenement, forcing him to live there. Superman, as we know historically, is a gentrifier. So putting Jimmy into a tenement was just a nightmare in Superman's eyes. What else did he do to Jimmy? Oh, Jimmy got him a gift, and Superman was telling him how terrible it was, and he was burning it in front of him while saying, "I wish I'd never adopted you." And there are various other forms of Superman dickery that he would perform on Jimmy Olsen. But I'm sure he's thinking about these pimp slaps and just thinking, I've just been too easy on Jimmy. So anyway, it turns out the act goes on, and the effects are becoming much more impressive. Now, what the young apprentice did, and this is dangerous considering this guy got pimp slapped multiple times, was that he actually stopped rigging the props. And because he knew that Cal Rocks was somehow accessing real magic. So because Cal Rocks was actually able to access real magic, the young apprentice didn't feel like he needed to prop or set up these props, getting kind of dangerous because he's really going to get pimp slapped if he screws up a second time. But nevertheless, the act is a big success. People are really impressed with the bigger and bigger events that they're doing. I'm going to turn the page. Going to take a look at this one in-house ad. It's for these Treasury editions. They're only highlighting two of them. It's the Shazam one and the Superman one. I had talked about Shazam earlier. This is DC really trying to push the character. Again, they thought they had a big moneymaker here. And as I had mentioned in other podcasts, the comic book companies were kind of pushing these. Because once again, they wanted the kids to spend more money on higher priced items. I remember some of these Superman stories. And I do have fond memories of them. I think they were stories some of the stories were from the 30s. I think it was sort of like the New Deal Superman. And it does look like they also included art from the 70s in it. I should kind of if I ever find this issue, I'll take a look, see what's in it. There's one little thing here. We've been swamped with orders. Please be patient. You will receive your copies as quickly and as humanly possible. Maybe they were selling really well through the mail order. I know on the newsstands they didn't. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the story of Krypton. Okay, so there's this big display where it's basically kind of a lake of fire. So Cal Rocks has recreated the lake of fire, and there is a waterfall. Now, initially, the people who are watching, they are really impressed. It's really super. It's really spectacular. However, the events get out of Cal Rocks' hands as the fire that's being created, since we know that they're accessing real magic and these aren't illusions. They're causing structural damage to this natural structure that the lake was a part of. And because of these flames, rather than being, say, taken away by a tsunami, they're going to be cascaded in flame here. Obviously, this causes a panic. The lake of fire is running wild. The audience seems to be trapped here, and probably some of the faster ones will get away. A lot of them won't.
The lucky ones are dead. Of the others, some will go mad. The others will slowly rot away and die in gradual agony.
Now, Cal Rocks here, he's saying, I'm not a brave guy. I'm not a brave guy. My old ass wants to live as long as possible. I want to collect as many Social Security checks as I can. He's saying, there's nothing that can stop these flames. I'm out of here. However, the young apprentice says something to him saying that, no, you can stop this. And what he's saying is that your magic can stop this. Now, Cal Rocks, remember, he never thought he had magic. He just thought the apprentice was really setting up some really nice stunts for him. But the thing is, he's hearing this from the apprentice saying that, hey, you actually can access magic. But Cal Rocks doesn't believe him, and the two are fighting. The apprentice is pleading with Cal Rocks to use his magic. Cal Rocks is saying, are you fucking nuts? I don't have magic. I need to get away from these flames, okay? But the thing is, the situation becomes so dire here that Cal Rocks is forced to actually try to stop the flames with his, quote, magic. And it turns out it works. Cal Rocks, he snaps his fingers, and then what happens is that the fire has been morphed into harmless balls of light. So the threat of the fire is finished. However, it turns out that Calrox never saw this because the mental trauma that he had gone through here had kind of snapped something in him, and it turned out that he had passed out and collapsed, and by the time that he had regained his senses, the magician had rigged a fake explanation for the flames to bubble. So what happened was that the apprentice convinced Calrox that he can use magic. Calrox used magic, but the mental trauma was so great that when Calrox regained consciousness, the apprentice was saying, I was just joking, my bad, and that it was actually really a setup that I had screwed up. Now that should have really given this apprentice a pimp slap, but it didn't. And so Calrox was reconvinced that he wasn't able to access magic. And that's the end of the story with Calrox. Superman is saying, I don't understand, Elder One. Why didn't Masmoth reveal to Calrox that he had gained the power of real magic? Then the museum curator, he says, because of Calrox's violent temper, Mazrox realized there would be disastrous consequences if Calrox ever threw a tantrum with all that power at his command. I kind of got a feeling that we're kind of reliving those moments right now with the White House. You know, older man has thrown temper tantrums and has a lot of power. So anyway, it turned out the apprentice still continued to work under Calrox. Calrox, I think he says that he was still using magic unknowingly, and that he never caught on to this. And apparently the magician died, and it was the apprentice who then kind of went public to explain how things were going. And he says that although Mazmox performed as a magician too, he never gained the power of his teacher. So Mazrox, the young apprentice, he was not able to access this magic switchboard, this cosmic magic switchboard. Superman, he says, what an amazing tale. Thank you, Elder One. Superman looks bored as fuck. And I bet the only thing he's thinking about that he needs to pimp slap Jimmy. And the museum curator, who turned out to be the apprentice. So the old museum curator was the young apprentice. And he's thinking to himself, and thank you, Master, for all these wonderful years you and I spent performing magic together. Well, you didn't perform any magic, one. Clearly, this guy has kind of like a taste for discipline. And, yeah, he kind of enjoyed being pimp slapped. So that's the end of that story. So I'm going to take a look at the Metropolis mailbag. And it appears that the letters are about issue number 275. The first letter is stroking Carrie Bates to such a degree that I'm thinking Carrie Bates himself wrote this letter. It's about the dragonfly invasion of Metropolis. This guy's saying that Carrie did a great job. He had these three intertwining storylines that he was able to kind of tie in together. And yeah, so Steve had nothing but nice things to say. The second letter is praising Jules Swartz. Jules, this is a great issue of this Jules Swartz edited comic book. I think part of that might have been from one. Jules Schwartz made himself into a prominent name, and I think maybe the fans noticed that the stories edited by him tended to be a little better than most of the other comics that weren't edited by him. But I think also if you praise Jules, that maybe your letter gets printed. So it turns out this guy Bill Wu, he's actually being very complimentary to Jules for a reason, in that that particular storyline did have Asian characters in it, and it turns out the letter writer is Asian. So he appreciated the fact that the representation that he saw was positive representation. You know, it wasn't sort of the kind of demeaning representation that would be, say, seen in the movies like Breakfast at Tiffany's or with those Charlie Chan films. Although I do have to say, 1970s, Charlie Chan and the Chan Clan, I love that cartoon. Remember that older sister was so hot, even as a cartoon. So anyway, so this guy Bill, he's very appreciative of this. Again, representation does matter. However, the editors, they kind of don't really, they can't see the forest from the trees because they answer back. It's nice to know that a reader of Chinese ancestry finds our treatment of the Japanese properly oriented. Kind of sounds like this editor didn't quite get it. But yeah, the thing with the Chinese and Japanese they're mentioning, because they are rivals of each other, so they tend not to be friendly. It's kind of like that episode of South Park with the Shitty Wok. Okay, the next one is the letter. Oh, this letter is focusing on some of the new characters. Because of the change in Clark Kent's employment, they started introducing new characters to the newsroom that were based on, kind of personalities that were already there in the media. Like they had created Lola Barnett, which was kind of an avatar for Rona Barrett, who is the most popular gossip columnist of the 1970s. And Steve Lumbar, of course, as we mentioned, I think he's a Joe Namath avatar. But the thing is, this writer is saying, listen, you have so many other great characters. You have Jimmy, you have Lois, you have Perry White, who's still running the newspaper. And he's saying, why don't you use those characters? Why don't you use Lucy Lane more, Alana Lane more? He's even asking about the mermaid, Laura Lormar. So, yeah, so the guys kind of saying, hey, listen, you don't need to kind of, focus on these new characters. You already have great characters as is. Then he's going on to the World of Krypton story. He really likes those stories. He's saying, listen, the art's never bad and stories are never bad. Yeah, he's saying those are the best. He's also praising the Private Life of Clark Kent, and he's also praising the Green Arrow B stories. Green Arrow didn't have his own comic at the time, but he was appearing as the B story in multiple comic books. So this guy, yeah, I remember reading some of those. Those really weren't that bad. Though there was one embarrassing issue. Okay, he's going on. I think they're saying, listen, we're going to include some of the more classic characters, and we're even going to bring Crypto back. So, just like maybe James Gunn saw this, because apparently in the new Superman movie, about 2.5 weeks away, Crypto's showing up. And the last letter is saying, was kind of a clever but not terribly interesting story. Okay, he's talking about Superman at an orphanage, which is very dangerous. Superman loves to clown on underprivileged kids, and but he's saying he enjoyed that story. I guess he wasn't that much of a dick. And that's it. And that is my review of Superman, issue number 279. And I hope to have more reviews up soon. Bye.